Hello, everybody, and welcome back to another episode of At the Movies with William Fletcher. As per usual, I am your host, William Fletcher, and unfortunately, Harry is unable to join me for this week's episode. He's very busy and is unable to join me, but I am joined by another person, a very special guest who I asked about 7 months ago, or whenever I asked to back in March, however long ago that was now. Join me for this one. He's never been on the show before. Mr. Sasha Wheatley.
Hello. Very excited to be here. Love all these. Well, I love most of these films. There's one in particular which I'm not really that big on.
Yes, this is. If you didn't listen to last week's episode for some reason, or like the last episode, this is talking about David Fincher's filmography to tie into the release of The Killer, which will be coming out this week on Netflix. And so we covered the first sort of 6 films of his filmography with Alien Cubed, Devin, The Game, Fight Club, Panic Room, and Zodiac. And we're concluding with The Curious Case of Benjamin Button, The Social Network, The Girl with the Dragon Tattoo, Gone Girl, and Mank. That's what we're going to be discussing on this week's episode. So, yeah, and by the way, just if Sasha sounds a bit weird at any point, Sasha's in a completely different country on the other side of the planet, so might be. Hopefully, it's all good though. Hopefully. So Sasha, do you have like sort of any general? Well, actually, before we even get into David Fincher, what is like to sort of for the listeners? What's like your would you be able to like describe your general like taste in films and your sort of like favorite films, that kind of thing, just as a
Okay. Yeah.
introductory thing, I guess.
I think I have quite a varied taste. I don't really think there's one specific thing. I'm kind of all over the place. But I do like a period piece. I am that person. I do love a period piece. Anything with women, which which was kind of a joke, that if there's a female lead character, I probably would enjoy it more than if it was a male lead character. Favorite films, my favorite film is Carol. I love my favorite Fincher films. I mean, we'll get into this, but are the female-centric films rather than more like the film bro favorites. I do like a thriller though. I do love a mystery, which is why we like Fincher. I think maybe that surprises some people with my taste, but I do really like Fincher as a director. I think kind of gets lumped together maybe a bit with Nolan and Tarantino, coming up in the 90s. All of them kind of get, I don't think it's a very fair tag, but kind of get labeled as like film bro favorites. I would say I respond to Fincher more than those two, at least. But I do think I like female sensibilities in films. My favorite director is Todd Haynes, and his genre is basically actressing. So
yeah, as I mentioned in the last episode, I put David Fincher as my favorite filmmaker just ever. I would say so. I'm thinking about other directors I like, and I think Fincher. The thing with Fincher, now that I've watched like all his films, is that even if I don't love all of his films, I think his direction is fantastic in like pretty much everything he's ever made.
Yeah.
Bar like Alien Cubed, but that one, I mean, he is the credited director, but I don't really count it because the studios were fucked around with that one, so I don't want to like. But it is technically one of his films, so I do have to count it. But I think Fincher, and yeah, he's sort of a film bro favorite, but and I find that very. I mean, I've talked about the term film bro on the show before and my sort of dislike for it because I do think it's a misused term in the sense of like I do agree that there are like. I go on like I scroll through like Instagram reels and there's like check out all these movies and it's literally just Inception, Dark Knight, Pulp Fiction. It's Nolan, Tarantino, Scorsese, Fincher's got a couple films. It's like these and and you know, and don't get me wrong, I think that, you know, most of those films are really great. It's just that in, you know, sort of a general sense, there's more films. Like,
Yeah, they're
there's more films
very
than that, you know.
very popular with a certain audience, and I think it does apply more to Nolan than Fincher. Like, I think Fincher's
Mm.
films, to label them as film bro, and I mean film bro doesn't have to be bad. I think it has become seen as a negative. It doesn't have to be a negative term. Film bros aren't, you
Yeah.
know, incels. But I think well, there's nothing wrong with being a film bro. I feel like it's become
No.
such a negative term. I do think
Yeah.
it's a limiting term. I mean, two of the films we're talking about today,
Yeah.
they have two iconic female characters. Benjamin Button isn't very. I wouldn't really classify that as a film bro classic. Even
No.
Fight Club. I mean, I've never seen Fight Club. That's like one of my biggest blind spots. And I've never.
Whoa, that's a big miss.
I know, I know. And I haven't seen Alien 3, but I don't really think that's
You're not
very
missing
definitive.
much. You are really not
um,
missing much.
I do need to see Fight Club, but even Fight Club, obviously, it's this deconstruction of masculinity. So even then, it feels a
Yeah.
bit wrong
And
to kind of.
capitalism as well. Like,
Yeah,
we
exactly.
touched on, it's a big deconstruction and it's a misinterpreted
Yeah,
film. Yeah, and I think, yeah, film bro, like, often when people start getting into films, those are probably going to be the films that a lot of people
hmm
watch when they first start watching them. Because they're just like the films, you know, like Fight Club. Everybody knows what Fight Club is, you know, stuff, Taxi Driver, you
yeah,
know, The Shine, Pulp Fiction, you know, these are like films people know. So obviously when you get into film, most are going to watch those first because, like, well, I've heard about this great film, I should watch it, you know. But I do think some people sort of don't get out of that sort of mindset of
yeah.
like they sort of like those films and they don't really want to
And they have
extend their
permeated our
knowledge.
culture, right? Like they're
Yeah,
very prevalent in our culture, and for the most part, they're very good. Though I would push back against The Shining being good because that's a terrible film, but that's for another day. Yeah,
uh,
it doesn't have to be a bad thing, and Fincher is a great director, regardless. I don't think I would
yeah,
classify him as one of my personal favorites, even though I think probably three or four of his films I would include in like a list of my favorite films. Just
hmm
because I don't really think I have a personal connection with any of his films. But I do really like him as a director, and I
yeah,
don't think he's made a bad film. Well, maybe one today, but we'll get onto
yeah.
that.
I guess to sort of get into the discussion, starting off with the curious case of Benjamin Button, which is one of the few, which is one of the three Fincher films I hadn't seen prior to this. I hadn't seen Panic Room, Benjamin Button, or The Girl with the Dragon Tattoo. So that's just sort of where I come in on that. But yeah, Benjamin Button, I watched it yesterday. Or does it say? I watched it fairly recently for the purposes of this, and
Yeah,
I I like it, but I would say it's one of the weakest Fincher films. Like, I, to be honest, I like it. I just am like, is there meant to be another level to this?
it does feel a little meaningless at the end. You're not really sure what to take away from it.
Because, you know, this was like a big Oscars contender. You know, it got nominated for like everything under the sun when
Yeah,
it came out, and I don't know, it just comparatively to Fincher, because we're going to talk about The Social Network, which was also a Fincher Oscar, you know, heavy hitter,
mm,
you know, getting in loads of categories. I mean, I think The Social Network is quite a bit better, and I found, you know, I did find Benjamin Button, I did find a bit of it boring, and I was sort of like, at a certain point, I was like, okay, why is this so long? Like, it's close to 3 hours, and I
yeah.
don't think it needs to be. I think you could cut it down, and
And it's
it would be better.
it's based on a short story as well. So they've taken a short story and they've turned it into a 3-hour film. So is quite task. I do think it's a film where it's very preoccupied with the concept, but is there anything kind of going on more than the concept? You kind of, the novelty of the concept wears off after seeing CGI and baby Brad Pitt a couple of minutes. I just think this film is genuinely insane. I think we need to talk about how weird this film is. Obviously there's the concept, but there's so many things going on here which I'm just a bit like, what is this? I understand why it's so long, because it's telling the story of his life, but his life isn't interesting. His life isn't like Forrest Gump. I hate Forrest Gump so much. That's got a charm
Thank
to
God,
it.
thank God Harry's here, because you would get into because Harry loves because my usual notice, he's a big Forrest Gump. I did an episode on Forrest Gump, and it was just me saying like, yeah, it's not that good, is it though? Like, I don't think it is. Go listen back to my Forrest Gump episode, because I'm not a big fan.
I'm probably the biggest Forrest Gump hater, and I don't think Benjamin Button is as bad as Forrest Gump, because David Fincher is a better director than Robert Zemeckis. But it has.
I do also prefer Benjamin Button to Forrest Gump.
Okay, yeah, I think it hasn't. It's Forrest Gump is very very positive, isn't it? It's got that charm, and this has more like a melancholic feel. There's like some very beautiful moments, but it's kind of a very sad film. First of all, I just don't understand why we open with old lady Cate Blanchett. I don't actually think it is Cate Blanchett. I don't know if it is her. I think it's another actress. Yeah.
It really doesn't look like her. Like, because even when Brad Pitt's like old, like you can tell like, oh, that's just Brad Pitt under a load of makeup, but it doesn't. Yeah, it does not look like Cate Blanchett at all. It's like
no, but I don't understand why it's taking place in Hurricane Katrina. It feels a little bit emotionally manipulative, that the fact that we're in Hurricane Katrina, and then she just tells her daughter, who for some reason looks exactly like Juliette Binoche in this. I don't know, but it really bothered me, because I was like, what? Why is Juliette Binoche here? Anyway, she just says, oh, can you read me Benjamin Button's diary? And the daughter obliges and reads like his entire life story. I hate the framing device. I think it's so convenient, and it's very unimaginative. And then I just don't understand why it's taking place with Hurricane Katrina in the background. It doesn't make sense to me.
I don't really get. Is that meant to be saying something? Because I was like, okay, this is interesting, but it doesn't really mean anything. It never impacts the plot, really. Like,
there's not even like a big scene where it's all Hurricane Katrina destroys everything. Like, there's the flood at the very end. Spoiler. But are we allowed to talk spoilers?
Yeah. That's fine. If you haven't seen any of these films, gonna spoiling everything. Like I say this all the time, but literally, if you've not seen these films, we're gonna spoil it. Just in every episode. So just, you are warned.
Yeah. Well, there's a flood at the very end of like the basement where the clock is, which kind of becomes like a symbol of Benjamin, but whatever. But that's it. There's not really any big. She just closes her eyes and is like, "Good night, Benjamin," and then it's implied she dies. There's no reason why Hurricane Katrina is going on. And then I read about something about how it could be a metaphor for the impermanence of life, and I just thought, really? Is that what we're doing here? I don't know. I think it's very convenient. I think it's a little bit emotionally manipulative. I guess because it's in New Orleans, but
it doesn't necessarily. It doesn't.
It doesn't actually specify where they are.
And it's also just like, so is it trying to say something? Like, is this saying something, or is it like? They just think, what would be interesting if this was taking place during Hurricane Katrina for...
Yeah. I don't know if it was just because the timelines matched up and they thought, oh, he's 80 now, let's just make it in Hurricane
Let's
Katrina.
just connect it to this.
But it's not in the short story, so they did just decide to add that.
Well, the short story, I looked it up, was written in like 1920. Like, it's very old. Like, it's...
Yeah.
So It's not even like that was there in the original. It's bizarre.
I think it's, funny that we were making comparisons to Forrest Gump. I think the other comparison made is Big Fish, but I've never watched Big Fish, so I don't know. But it is funny that it is written by Eric Roth, who also wrote Forrest Gump. And I don't really understand why Eric Roth is such a legend in the industry.
I want to look at his filmography now, just because I saw that he wrote.
Yeah, well, when June came out, people were like, "Oh, it's gonna get an Oscar nomination because Eric Roth's a writing legend. He's written, did Killers of the Flower Moon, right? I think.
Yeah, he wrote Killers of the Flower Moon. Yeah, with Scorsese.
But
yeah.
I'm not a fan of Forrest Gump, which he wrote. I don't think A Star Is Born is very well written, which he wrote. I don't think Benjamin Button is very well written, which he wrote. So yeah, I'm not really a big Eric Roth person.
He also wrote Extremely Loud and Incredibly Close, which
wow,
I know got. Yeah, I've never seen it, but I just know it was inexplicably an Oscar-nominated film, even though it was universally hated.
And
so yeah, Brad Pitt. I mean, we touched on. I've touched on in the last episode. Well, we talked about Brad Pitt and Fight Club, and how I would put that as probably my favorite performance of his career, and how much I think Brad Pitt's he's a very good talent. I just don't I don't think he's like the most amazing actor ever, but I think he is very capable of very good performances. I don't think this is it though. I don't think this is the performance I'm like, oh, this is a good Brad Pitt performance. It's like he's fine. I just am like, this is it's alright.
Yeah. And like you were saying, if you're looking for a classically trained actor who's got impeccable technique, Brad Pitt isn't your guy. But he does have that charisma, he does have that stage presence, whatever, etc., etc. Screen presence, not stage presence. But yeah, I don't think Benjamin Button plays to his strengths as an actor at all. I think it's because
it's too nuanced. I don't know. Maybe I don't know.
I don't think Benjamin Button's very nuanced as a character. I think he's very empty. I think he's very dull and bland. Things just happen to him. He has no sense of agency or urgency.
He's almost a passive protagonist.
Exactly. Like Daisy, I think Daisy's not a very nice person, but at least she's giving something. Benjamin Button just walks around and things happen to him. People talk about themselves to him. He never does anything actively. And that affects Pitt's performance because there's not really much he can do. I think he's probably Oscar nominated because of the uniqueness, the novelty attached to his performance. He's playing a man at so many different ages. And I think the makeup holds up pretty well. 2023.
I think the makeup is very good. I will give the film that. Like, makeup wise, it looks very good. And I was expecting it to have aged a bit because 2008 this came out, but I actually think it has aged very well. Actually, I think it looks very impressive. Like it's obviously like, oh, it's just Brad Pitt, but it's like it's still very good makeup.
Accomplished work. But no, I don't think he needed an Oscar nomination for this at all. I don't think it's even a performance. But when you think of Brad Pitt, you think of some of his cult classic performances. If you're going to think of maybe more recent performances, you might gravitate more towards Moneyball, Primetime Hollywood, whatever. I don't think anybody's thinking, oh, Benjamin Button, that was the peak of his career.
No one's ever going to be like, you know what the best Brad Pitt performance is? Benjamin, but like no one's ever going to go for that one. For most people, it probably wouldn't even make top 10 Brad Pitt performances for like most people. They'd be like, it would maybe like top 15 or top 20 maybe, but it's like top 10 no one's gonna really sing the praises of that. It's fine, but because I find the concept of it, of the whole aging backwards interesting. It's just the film's a bit dull at times. And I do like it, but it's just like...
It does feel quite sterile, and it just hops from, timeline to timeline. And I do, I keep saying this, but I do think the main issue is he's very boring. Like, even when he has an affair with Tilda Swinton's character, it's just her talking at him. And there came a point where I felt, when he sees her on TV crossing the channel when she's an old lady, I thought, can we have Tilda Swinton's Naiad, please, instead of this? Because that's just so much more interesting than whatever we're watching. This is so dull. What do you think of the other performances? Tilda, Kate?
Kate, I love Kate Blanchett as an actor. I think she's a wonderful talent. She doesn't really do any, like, I just was like, okay, I know Kate Blanchett's capable of more, like, she's capable of more, I think. This isn't really like, I'm a big Kate Blanchett. I've seen it, like Tar, for example, one of the best performances last year. Thought she was really incredible in that. I've seen her in a lot of things, and I was just like, she's fine.
No, again, nobody's going to be thinking Kate Blanchett's best performance is Benjamin Button. Nobody's going to be saying Tilda Swinton's best performance is Benjamin Button. I mean, Tilda Swinton's hardly in it. I think she's very good in the scenes she's in.
Yeah, she's not in it that much at all.
No, she's literally in those like 5 scenes of them going on dates in Russia, and then she just leaves. Kate Blanchett, I agree. I don't think this is particularly challenging work. She is just a love interest. I think her accent's a bit overdone. I don't really care about accents that much. There's really not much for her to sink her teeth into. I really do not like Daisy as a character, and I think it's so funny that the only time Daisy actually begins a relationship with him is when he's like peak Brad Pitt hotness, when he's like like a 30-year-old. It's like, okay, so now you're going to start a relationship with him.
Yeah, now, right, yeah.
Looking like an Abercrombie model.
Yeah. You know what is so weird about this film? That Taraji P. Henson was Oscar nominated.
I know. And in a way, I'm like, okay, that's nice, that's cute. Like, she's a very cute, warm presence in this.
Barely remember her in it, though.
No, she has the first couple of, scenes when she's raising him, and then she's kind of relegated to him coming home and her just like getting older, and that's really it. There's not really a big scene. I don't think she needs an Oscar nomination for this. I think she's the weakest in her lineup that year. She doesn't need I'm happy that Taraji P. Henson's an Oscar nominee, but I don't really need this. And also Mahershala Ali just like randomly being in this film, and I think it's his film debut, and it's just, that's another thing which is just so random.
Yeah, he'd done a couple of other things before, but they weren't like features. Like he'd acted in like a couple, I think like short films or something, but this was his like feature film debut. So
that's just so random. And I mean, he doesn't do anything noteworthy. He's fine as well. Yeah, she didn't need an Oscar nomination. Neither did Brad Pitt.
Brad Pitt.
It did not need probably 9 or 10 of those 13 nominations. I can see why. Obviously, the makeup, production design, sure. Even the I don't know, the cinematography, I felt like it was very beautiful in some scenes, but there were some scenes on the boat in the seas where I felt like it was getting a bit, like I genuinely felt like I was watching the Polar Express. It was a bit, this is a bit, and then the second half, when they begin their relationship and there's a string of romantic scenes when they're swimming and stuff in these lakes and oceans, it genuinely looked like a commercial to me. I didn't think it was like that scene when Kate's with the blue water. I thought, what is this, a commercial? And then there's the scene with them painting around the house where it genuinely felt like it was a Gap advert or something. It's just very strange. I don't really, I think there's some really beautiful scenes, but I'm not really a fan of Claudia Miranda as a whole, so maybe that's why.
This film also, it doesn't really feel like a David Fincher film either.
No.
All the others, I'm like, oh, this is a Fincher, like it's got his fingerprints all over it. And this one's like, if I didn't know David Fincher directed this, I wouldn't have even picked up that this was like a film he might have directed. because it really does not feel like one of his films, which
Not at all.
is maybe a sign of good direction, that like it's, I think it is a well-directed movie, but I'm just like, it's not
Yeah.
really a Fincher movie. It's not a film like, oh, Fincher. Then, it's not.
And it's not even just because of its genre. Like I think in Mank you can still feel like it's a Finch film because it's got his humor, it's got his wit all over it.
Mm,
This isn't funny. This isn't. It's not got,
no.
it's also quite clunky. I think what really struck me watching Social Network, Gone Girl, Dragon Tattoo is they run so smoothly. They're edited immaculately. They, really feel the runtime. This one is just very clunky. It is nihilistic. It is quite fatalistic and cynical in a way, like those
Mm,
films, but it doesn't, it doesn't have his vision all over, and I'm just very confused why he chose to make it. I don't really understand what attracted him to this project. It
mm.
feels like the antithesis of what Fincher's sensibilities are. Um, yeah, strange choice.
Yeah, I mean, I don't really have a whole lot to say on Benjamin. I thought the last 20 minutes or so were really nice and sort of like, okay, it sort of made the film sort of worth it for me, but I don't see myself ever watching this again unless I'm doing like a whole Fincher rewatch, because I have no
Yeah.
interest in watching it again, and I think my score might be a bit generous.
What did you end up giving it?
I gave it and I cannot stress this enough. This is so very much on the precipice of being a 7, but I gave it a very weak 8.
Oh,
Just
really?
like, because the last 20 minutes or so, I was like, okay, that's really nice. Because it was sort of sitting at like a 7 out of 10 for the most part. And then the ending was like, oh, that was nice. I like that. So it's a weak 8, but it's like bottom tier Fincher. Like, it's like his third weakest film for me. Think that, yeah, third. I'd probably say Panic Room and Alien Cubed are worse.
I did not dislike it. To stress, I don't dislike. I don't think it's a bad film. I think I gave it a 5, maybe a 6. I think a 5,
Hmm.
which maybe sounds low, but that for me is, definition of mixed, which is what I am.
I think 5
Um,
is like the precipice before it starts to become a bad. Like a low 5 is like when films
yeah,
start to become bad.
yeah.
Um,
I don't think it's active. I mean, I think there's some bad scenes, but I don't think it's a bad film. And I admire kind of. There is a part of it where it does feel like this really grand, epic romance which spans 3 hours, but it never really gets there. And there's some really beautiful moments, which I responded to, and I respect because I think this was very talked about when it came out. I remember being aware of it. I think it made a lot of money, and the technology and everything to do with that. So I admire, the use of the technology and all the crafts going into this. But no, I think at 5 is where I'm at. I really cannot stress how much I dislike the framing device of Hurricane Katrina. I don't find him entertaining as a character. I don't enjoy following him. And I don't think he has chemistry with Daisy. And I don't think he has chemistry with Tilda Swinton. And I can kind of excuse the Tilda Swinton because it's very much, you can tell she's very lonely. It's the first person kind of who will listen to her basically. It's not, some grand romance. But with Daisy, I didn't really feel the connection. I
mm,
did find it funny when you're first introduced to Daisy. I mean, it's not that she's attracted to him, but she's supposed to be very kind, like not attracted, but won over by him. It's this 7-year-old
yeah,
Daisy and this like 8-year-old Brad Pitt, and
yeah.
it's just a bit laughable. And as for the final 20 minutes, they didn't really work for me as much because I felt like decision to use another actor completely, and okay, maybe the technology limited them here, but I felt like
Mm,
if you've used Brad Pitt for all this and you've aged him up to an 80-year-old, you may as well commit to Brad Pitt at the end. It just felt like, oh, it's a different person at this point because they're using a child actor. And I get like the technology, maybe it wasn't feasible. Um,
yeah,
no, I can see how that was emotionally resonant. For me, it wasn't.
yeah. No, I
But
totally get that.
No, yeah, there's not really much to say. Like, I think it's okay. Crafts wise, there's things to admire. There's some really beautiful moments. And yeah, it is probably my least favorite Fincher. I'm not sure. I think I would probably put it last.
All
Yeah.
right, so moving on to The Social Network, and this is a film that could have an entire episode dedicated to just this one film. But like, yeah, it's great. What can like? Wow, I love The Social Network. What a surprise! This movie that everybody loves. I love it. You know what a. I mean, unless it's Sasha, because I've 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 said this off recording to other people. Like, if I like a film, I'm just gonna assume Sasha doesn't like it because that often happens. Like, I
Yeah.
when I saw Life is Beautiful, I was like, oh, that's right. I know Sasha doesn't like this one.
Oh my God. We'll surprise people and say that I really like The Social. I feel like this is such a film that everybody claims. I'm just like, it was fine. But no, I really like The Social Network. Great film. I agree. It's very, I found this the most difficult film to talk about coming into this. I feel like I
Mm,
have kind of more of a connection to some films we're going to talk about later. And Benjamin Button was easier to kind of critique. The Social Network
mm,
is great. Um, Not really anything else to add to that. It's pretty much a perfect movie. Um, it got that timeless quality to it, and which is kind of funny because whenever I watch it, I feel like it kind of transports me back to that 2010 vibe, but it's not dated at all. It's
no.
timeless.
Yeah.
It is about Facebook, but it's about so much more. It feels very Shakespearean. Some of its presentation of its themes, the cost of obtaining power,
Yeah.
things like that. I think people really. I'm not as big on the score as others are, but I can recognize it's very,
I'm a big fan of the score. I think the score's
yeah.
really,
I think the score's
yeah.
very good. I just prefer some of the other collaborations. And the
Mm,
editing, I think it is one of the best edited films of the
mm.
past decade. I think if you had to single out one element, what would you single out the screenplay, or would it be?
I think, yeah, I've talked to people about this before, and I think you'll disagree with me, but I think Aaron Sorkin is a really great writer for the most part. Um, I think in sort of more recent years, there's been a bit of people starting to turn on Aaron Sorkin as a writer,
Yeah.
and to be fair, being the Ricardos isn't that great. Like, it's not.
It's
It's
also
fine.
not that bad.
It's not terrible. I don't think it's a bad film, but I
No.
don't think it's as great as I'm used to. You know, I did really like Trial of Chicago 7, which I imagine you didn't like, maybe.
Mm, no, not really a huge trial fan.
Yeah.
But
Um.
I am kind of a Ricardo's defender. Maybe that's just Nicole Kidman.
Of course you are.
Um, but but I Aaron Sorkin's not one of my favorite writers, but I do get the appeal with him. I think um sometimes he's got that very like spitball, highly intelligent um way of like his character speaking, and sometimes it
Yeah.
does feel a bit contrived. But
Mm.
what he managed to do is he selects characters where it kind of fits that they would speak like that,
Yeah.
and I think this is why it works. But I don't have any complaints about the Social Network screenplay. It
Mm.
fits perfectly that Mark Zuckerberg would talk like that. It's not.
Yeah.
Of who on earth talks like this? It's Mark Zuckerberg. Like, okay,
Yeah. Exactly.
I can.
Yeah.
I think the opening scene, the conversation between Jesse Eisenberg and Rooney Mara,
Mm.
epic way of starting film. I think that's probably my favorite scene in the entire movie, and it sets the tone, for the entire film so well. And
Yeah.
it gives you like a real glimpse of what the screenplay. It shows off the best parts of the screenplay in that opening scene.
Hmm.
And I think the best is Sorkin as a writer.
Yeah.
But no, I would single out the screenplay. I think is the thing that I really
I
take.
think. Yeah. Yeah. But I think. this is still like a very well directed movie. It's a
Oh, for
shame
sure.
Fincher didn't win the Oscar for this. Like,
Yeah.
I
Although
haven't seen The King's Speech. I can't
I wouldn't,
say like it didn't deserve it, but like,
you
come
can
on,
probably guess that. Yeah.
there's no way
I,
Fincher didn't deserve an Oscar for that. Like, if it didn't win picture, whatever. I just wish like Fincher had an Oscar now, because he should have had one by now. Like, he should have gotten an
yeah.
Oscar win at some point, and it's like, I don't
Although,
think he ever will, to be honest. I think his time has passed, and I don't think he's gonna win. I'm like,
no,
I don't see a realm where he wins.
if he's not winning for Mank or Benjamin Button, and then he's
Yeah,
not winning for like the
Social
acclaimed
Network.
film of the year, The Social Network,
Yeah,
then it is
like
hard to see him.
the
And he's
like best of the decade to some Social Network,
yeah.
retrospectively.
And it's not even like The Social Network was the most acclaimed film of the year, and it was like a critic. Like, it's very easy to digest, and it came so close, and it still didn't win.
Yeah,
So, and obviously he's a
I just
director,
don't.
that means he's not going to win his, like, for screenplay or whatever. It
Yeah,
limits his options.
yeah,
Um,
exactly. He's a
I
director
wouldn't give him.
first. No, he's not really. He's not a
I
writer at
wouldn't.
all. Yeah.
No, I wouldn't give him director though for this. Um,
Mm.
but I do
Would
agree
would
that
you have
it's.
given it? Would you have given it to? I'm trying to think of what came out that year.
Well, it pains
Do
me
you,
to say considering he made The Whale, but I would give it
yeah,
to
I was gonna say
Aronofsky.
it's a Black Swan, because that
Yeah,
seems like a film you like. I mean, I like it
I
too. To
do.
be fair, Black Swan is very good.
I prefer Black Swan to this, but I do think The Social Network is more. It's probably the better film. Like, Black Swan's kind of trash, like in a good way. Like, I think like a trashy masterpiece against Tom Hooper. Like, he definitely did deserve to win. Yeah, he did deserve to win over Tom Hooper. I agree that it's incredibly well directed. I know we've spoken about the screenplay, singled that out, but it is an incredibly well directed film. I think it really plays into Fincher's sensibilities. I think Fincher's at his best, where he manages to mix his dark humor into these stories, which is what he does so well in The Social Network. Again, there's a lot of very funny scenes in The Social Network. I also love the cinematography in this. I love the color palettes being used.
Yeah, I think like this is for a film that's like it's the Facebook movie essentially, but it's so incredibly well put together. Like, again, cinematography I think is great. Screenplay. I wouldn't put Aaron Sorkin as like one of my favorite all time writers, but I think he's a very very good writer, and I think his scripts are very written, which I can definitely see why that doesn't necessarily appeal to everyone, but I think it works in
Yeah,
Social Network. The Social
yeah,
Network
for
is a
these
perfect
characters.
example of
Yeah,
that. Yeah. I guess to sort of move on to sort of the acting as well. Jesse Eisenberg, very. Look, I think Jesse Eisenberg's good in this, but I also think it's not the most difficult role necessarily. Like, I don't know if I've talked about this on here before, but I think it's easy to play sort of emotionless characters on screen. I think it's not to say it can't be great acting, but it's like it's not as difficult, or at least I don't think it's as difficult necessarily.
no, I agree. I think I can see why when it first came out, this was kind of like Jesse Eisenberg's first major role, right? If I'm correct. So I can see
Yeah,
why it was
he'd been
kind
in
of
Zombieland before this, and I think there's a couple
okay,
other
but
things,
this
but this
was
was like his
yeah, and I can
sort
see
of
why everybody was so excited about the performance, but I think it's one of those where as it's gone on, you realize he is playing Mark Zuckerberg, but he is kind of Jesse Eisenberg in this still, and in his like other
yeah,
performances since then are quite similar, and it's tough to like kind of separate where Jesse Eisenberg
yeah.
leaves
So
and
I'm just
Mark
looking at
Zuckerberg.
his filmography. Yeah, so I haven't heard of most of this, but he was in the M Night Shyamalan film The Village, and he'd also done Zombieland, and this was his big thing
First,
though, like that he did.
yeah, But no, I do think he's very good. He nails, Sorkin's dialogue. I do think there's a couple of opportunities where he doesn't really uncover like the vulnerability and isolation of Zuckerberg in some scenes where I feel like maybe another actor could do that. Instead, you do kind of get a very singular portrait, and definitely there are scenes where you see more sides to him, but I think that's more to do with how he's directed rather than his actual performance. But it's a very good performance. I don't think it's, I think some people would say, oh, he deserved to win over Colin Firth. I mean, I prefer Colin Firth, but I don't really think either of them are legendary performances or anything. I think, an Oscar nomination feels about right for him. Yeah. What do you think about the rest of the cast?
Well, we've got Andrew Garfield, and I've sung his praises many times on this show before. I think Andrew Garfield is a very, very good talent, and like we mentioned with Black Swan earlier, how Mila Kunis should have been Oscar nominated for that. I stand by that. I think Andrew Garfield should have been Oscar nominated for The Social Network. It's probably my favorite performance of his. And I've seen him give really, really great performances. I think he's a very good actor. I've never seen Andrew Garfield in something where I didn't think he was good. Even if the film wasn't that great, I always think he's good at the very least.
I like on Andrew Garfield in this too. I'm not as, I think it's a common thing when people look back on this year, they're like, oh, how is he not nominated? But I do think, looking at the field, he deserves nomination over quite a few of them, including winner. But I'm not as big on his performance as others. I think it really comes down to that one big scene, right?
Fuck you flip-flops, which I love that scene. I can't pretend I don't love the scene.
No, it's a great scene. It's a great scene, but sometimes for me, if I ignore that scene, there's not really anything else in his performance where I'm like, that was incredible. But I think he's very good, don't get me wrong. And even in that scene, it is a very iconic scene, but I don't necessarily think it's kind of that one scene. There's a couple of scenes that an actor has, and you're just like, okay, give them the award for that. It's not necessarily like that for me, but I think he's good throughout. I think the entire cast is very strong, apart from one person, Justin Timberlake. I find him just very distracting. Okay. I don't think he's necessarily bad. I just think he's very distracting in this.
I remember when I watched it the first time, I was like, oh, Justin Timberlake is in this.
Yeah, because this was back when he was, pushing that acting career. And I think it's
not what I'm used to from him.
I think it's really ballsy that he was I just love Fincher's casting of actors, to have this film and then cast basically a bunch of unknowns. I know Andrew Garfield had Never Let Me Go, I think, before this.
That was the same year, but yeah,
the same year. So he wasn't really the hot property or whatever. He wasn't that well known. And then also to cast Justin Timberlake, this massive pop star, also in this. You just have to applaud his casting, and then obviously discovering Rooney Mara in this, who I think is very good in her few three scenes she has. Really love the opening scene with her and Eisenberg.
Yeah, you're a big Rooney Mara fan.
I am a big Rooney Mara fan. I'm not saying she deserves awards for this, don't get me wrong, but I think she's very good in this. No, I think she's very good in her scenes. And I was just going to mention Brenda Song being in this. I found it so funny that London Tipped In is in the most acclaimed film of the year. That's just very funny to me, and I enjoy her scene when she sets it on fire in Ricardo's.
Yes,
very funny scene. Which is what I was saying earlier. I was saying Social Network is very funny, and that's kind of Fincher at his best, when he can mix all these themes of intellectual property, isolation, betrayal, power, etc., but also with an underbelly of humor to it. And I think Armie Hammer, talking about Armie Hammer in 2023, but I think he's well cast here. I don't think he's very good. I'm not saying that he's a very good performance, but I think he's perfectly cast. He's got, that waspy energy, privileged,
Yeah.
preppy vibe to him. I found it quite
Mm.
distracting, the CGI with the
Yeah. Well, because at
I
first I
found that
was
a bit
like, I thought he
distracting.
had like I don't know, a brother or
Twin.
something, and I was like,
Yeah.
yeah. Also, I thought it was like, oh, he'd think, wow, it's really close, and then read after was like, oh, it was literally just him. I'm like, huh, that is an interesting decision, because nowadays, I mean, that it would be, I feel like it would be a lot easier to do that with just the advancements in CGI.
I think, sorry, just to like round off with Social Network, I think it's very interesting seeing how Fincher, just to, it is a Fincher retrospective, just to, end with a focus on his direction. I think it's very interesting that he kind of applies his approach to thrillers with this. It's a story about Facebook, but you have all these cuts, like very fast-paced cuts. Like you would think this was an action film or something, and it's
Yeah.
literally just about the creation of Facebook. You have some really moody cinematography, which shoots Harvard like it's just a very unique way of looking at it. Like it's a university, but it's shot in such a moody way, which also I think gives it this kind of nostalgic feel to it. And so I think he really captures he really plays with light and darkness in this. Um,
Hmm.
and yeah, like it's a film about Facebook, but he does so much with it, and he applies kind of elements of thriller and noir to this. Um,
Hmm.
but it's a film about Facebook. But that's why it's so good.
I don't like I can't really fault, like it's a great movie. Like I find the poster to be a bit strange though. The whole like, oh, to make, what is it? It's like if you want to
Oh,
make,
you don't get to 5 million friends without making some enemies or something, whatever it is. That
yeah.
one.
I'm not sure. I'm not the biggest fan of that, to be honest.
But no, I agree. I have no notes. I have no criticisms. Except like that slight critique of Jesse Eisenberg's performance. I think, yeah, it's pretty much a perfect film. It's just I'm more attached to some other Fincher films, which is why it isn't my personal
Yeah.
favorite. But
I mean, it's not my
it
favorite
makes
Fincher either.
it really.
No.
Oh, Fight Club, right?
Yeah. I know.
Um,
What a boring choice. I give it 10.
I didn't give it a
Yeah,
10. I gave it a 9, but that's,
no.
you know,
Yeah,
yeah.
it's pretty good. So following on from the Social Network, a year later, he released The Girl with the Dragon Tattoo, which was the last Fincher film I hadn't seen, and I literally rewatched it like 10 minutes before we started recording. So yeah, it's very fresh in the mind. I did like it. I didn't quite love it though. I thought there was a lot about it that I did really like, and there was some of it that I was not as big of a fan of.
Well, I'm glad. I think we have very different opinions on this, which I'm glad because I felt like we had quite similar thoughts on the other two. But I
Yeah, a
love
little
this
bit.
film. This is one of my favorite films of all time.
Is it
I
your
prefer it to The Social.
yeah?
Is it my
Is it your
favorite Fincher?
favorite
It isn't.
Fincher? It
No,
isn't. Okay.
no. I
Oh
feel
well.
I feel like my favorite Fincher is very obvious. Yeah. So no, I really love this. I disagree with it being too long. I think this
Okay.
film is edited perfectly. I think the editing is even better here than it is in Dragon Tattoo and in The Social Network. I think this film is so perfectly stitched together. The intersecting timelines, I think it flows seamlessly. I think it moves constantly. I don't think there's any
Mhm.
lags in pacing at all. Um, and I think it really warrants its runtime because it's a very very simple crime drama, right? But the
Mhm.
crime isn't that interesting. If we're honest, it's not it's also very obvious who the murderer is just from the casting. Like
Mhm.
we're only given a couple of suspects, right? And we already know from those suspects that it can only be like three of them because we know it's a man. And
Yeah.
who's it going to be? Oh, I think it's probably going to be the one who's got the most notable actor, Stellan Skarsgård, right?
Yeah.
And I don't even think Fincher makes much an attempt to conceal that even early on when Daniel Craig's pinning up like the pictures of the family on the wall. The camera only focuses on Christopher Plummer and then Stellan Skarsgård's character Martin, who's the murderer. So like I don't that's not really the point of the film. Like it's a very simple crime mystery and it doesn't really matter who did it as such. Like it's not really a great reveal, is it? It's not really, oh my god, I had no idea Martin could do this. It's like, oh, okay.
I will say I wasn't fully engaged with, like, I was watching it, like there were certain points where I was like really getting into it, and some bits where I was just like, okay, this is, it wasn't. I wouldn't say it was boring. It was just sort of like there was moments that I was more engaged with than others. I
Which
did really.
was that to do with the intersectioning timelines? Like, were you more interested in Elizabeth or
I think. I don't think I was. I probably should have paid a bit more attention than I was to it. But like there were certain moments where, as it was sort of going on and sort of things were getting revealed, it's like, okay. And then there's like the scene where Daniel Craig gets captured, and I was like, okay, this is working now. I think I did. I don't know. I feel like I've touched before. I was not a fan, and I mean, I'm not supposed to be, but all the rape stuff did really
okay, yeah.
I just like, okay, like I get it, but at a certain point I was like, okay, I don't know if this is all like
You,
it
you
being
dislike
referenced.
do you
I
dislike
don't.
the inclusion of the rape scenes, or is it just how he like holds like the graphic depiction,
I
or is it just
think
you think,
I think seeing it, like the one we see with Rooney Mara, she's like, okay, I don't need to see this. I don't want to see this. I just,
yeah,
it's very just like, if it being like, if it was referenced or was talked about, that's like fine. That doesn't bother me really. It's the seeing it happen that I was like, okay, this is going a bit over the line for me. I'm not
okay,
that bothered about things generally. I just think there's a certain lines that's like, okay, like have you, and I think using this rape as like a plot point isn't, it doesn't, I don't have an inherent problem with it. Like context is key. Like the context in which it is used and how it's used as sort of the frame, if it's used as like a framing device or whatever, that I don't necessarily mind. I just don't, personally, for me, I don't think there's a need to ever show it. Purely because
okay,
I think it's a, like, and it's like it's not that like. Well, I just think it's a bit too like violence in general doesn't bother me necessarily. Again, it's contextually based. Like what is being shown? Why is it being shown? Does it need to be shown? Really, I think that's what, like, is
okay,
there a reason for it to be shown? If it was a bit implied, but like that's what he's gonna do to her, then like that's like that doesn't bother me as much. But the fact that we see it sort of happen, I'm like, okay, that's a bit
yeah.
too much for me.
Makes sense. I completely respect that. For me, I um
Oh
um
god.
I I'm gonna say sounds a bit weird. It was less graphic than I remember it being, which sounds really
Oh,
horrible to
okay.
say.
I mean,
Like
it's
I remember
pretty. I
it
thought it was
being.
pretty graphic as is.
I
I think,
think it
but
is graphic. I think, you know, it's not really my place to say whether you should show rape in a film or not. But I
mhm.
think the overarching theme of the film is, violence towards women perpetuated by men, whether that's the social structures in place, whether that's the political structures in place. And we get that with the murders. It's they're all incredibly violent crimes against women. So I think it has thematic relevance, and I think with there's like kind of two rape scenes on there. There's one where Elizabeth is raped by her handler, like her,
the guy who's giving her money to live.
Yeah, and that is graphic, but I do think it's if somebody hasn't seen this film, it isn't like a 15-minute unflinching depiction. It is graphic, but it doesn't show like the whole duration of the rape. It doesn't depict there's you know what's going on. It's not just implied, like you do see it, but it didn't like hold on it for several minutes, at least for me. I think what Finch does is then when Elizabeth tortures him, it actually shows more of that, which I thought was a sensible choice, to show less of her rape and to show more of her torture of him. I felt that was as tasteful as it can be when you're depicting rape. And obviously there's going to be people who will say you shouldn't show rape at all, this is too graphic for me. Completely understand that. But for me personally, I felt like that was a sensible choice. You kind of see her torture of him for several minutes, and I felt like it went on much longer than it did, him raping her.
Yeah.
So yeah, I completely understand that. But just to go back to the original thing about it being a very simple crime mystery, like it operates as that, and then it operates as a psychological portrait of Elizabeth, which I think is a very interesting character. I think she's very absorbing. I think Rooney Mara is really incredible in this. I don't think it's her best performance, but she is really great in this. And I think there's more thematic depth to this than I originally remember there being. So obviously there's the violence towards women. You get the generational aspect of it, where Martin is kind of taking after his father, who's raped his sister, who's murdered all these women. Has kind of misogyny as a generational thing. There's hints of the uncomfortable truth behind anti-Semitism in Sweden. So you have many European countries where people just like to forget about it, or they kind of like to distance themselves from their Nazi past. But you kind of get, it's not really an examination, but it's touched upon here. Several of the Wagner family used to be Nazis, and then there's one who's like very unapologetic about it, right? Harold. So I think there's thematic depth there. And one thing I picked up on actually was Martin. He's obviously a complete psychopath. He's committed all these terrible crimes, but kind of how men view women. So when Elizabeth arrives in the island he's staying on in, I think it's Hedestad, Martin keeps referring to her as his girlfriend, and he says many times, "Oh no, it's my assistant." And I know maybe I'm looking too much into this, but I think it was a very like purposeful choice. Like he does this 3 times, where Martin can only view women as like sexual. She's not your assistant, she's your girlfriend, or go back to your girl. If that makes sense. He's viewing her solely as this kind of sexual object, and we see this with Elizabeth, that it's clearly, she mentions that she tried to burn her father, and it's almost a comical way, and she says it, they're like on the bed, and she says, "Oh, I got like 80% of him," and Daniel Craig's just like, "Oh," he just doesn't really know what to say. But I think there's kind of an implication in the other film, the Swedish original. I don't know if you've seen that, but that's also very good. But I think it's improved. It's literally beat for beat the same film, but I think this is on another level, technically speaking. But I think it's implied also in the book that Elizabeth's father was sexually abusive. And I think we really see that in Elizabeth's demeanor, you know, how she kind of covers up her skin with baggy clothing, the tattoos, the piercings, because like her body is almost, you know, this like source of abuse, and she's kind of trying to cover all of that. So I think, yeah, it's a very simple crime, but there's so much more going on, and I think it's a perfect noir. It was so important that they filmed in Sweden. The landscape, you know, the light, the darkness, how he plays with light and darkness. We spoke about that in Social Network, but it's amplified here. We have severely flawed characters. You know, Mikhail is in disgrace. He's having an affair with a married woman. Elizabeth obviously, you know, does things not by the book. You don't get a perfectly satisfying conclusion. We see that moment of vulnerability, and your heart really breaks for her when she buys the jacket and she goes to meet him. And even then, Mikhail isn't like the others, but still he has, you know, that's another time when a man has, he's not being violent, but he's kind of used her in that sense, and he's gone back. And even then you're like, oh, that's another case where a man has kind of let down Elizabeth in her life. So I think there's so much more than meets the eye originally. I understand your complaints about it being too long, but no, I loved it. I really, really love this film. I think this is probably controversial, but I think this is Fincher's best film on a technical level. I think the sound work is incredible. That the wind, you know, just it really captures the landscape, which is so important for bringing the story to life. The cinematography stunning. The mood, I think, is the best in any Fincher film. I think he sets the mood perfectly for this. And I love the sound work when it's like the howl of the wind. You know, at the start when Mikhail, sorry, I'm talking so much, but when Mikhail goes to Martin's house, which also, again, love the contrast in the production design. So that you have Martin's house, which represents this new Sweden, the minimalist, modern, contrast with Henrik's old money, grand estate. Anyway, he goes to Martin's house and he's there. He's eating with his like girlfriend. It's implied it's his girlfriend, but she won't, you know, marry him. And you hear something, and it sounds like the wind, and it's you can hear this howl. And it's, you know, later he reveals it was this girl called Irina downstairs. And it's just things like that. The sound work is just off the charts, incredible. I think it's edited perfectly, how the two timelines converge. Yeah, I just am in love with this film. And I think, you know, when you have two corresponding timelines, you really need them both to be as strong as each other. And personally, I was invested in both Mikhail's and Elizabeth's. It wasn't really an issue for me, but I understand your points completely.
To sort of talk about the sound, I also love the way that the film uses the immigrant song, just the sort of cover it does of the immigrant song. That was like, I think it was like the trailer. They used that song like over the trailer.
They use it in the trailer too. Yeah.
Yeah, I thought that was a really good like use of the song. Actually, I thought it worked really well. I do think Rooney Mara is very good in this. I think Daniel Craig is a very underrated actor. Like, I don't think he's amazing. I think he's actually.
Yeah, I remember when I first watched this, and I was a little bit off put, like James Bond showing up, but I think his casting's perfect. It's not an incredible performance, but he's very good. He's kind of got that like charisma that's needed. You can see why he's attracted to Elizabeth as a person. Yeah, I think he's really, really good in this. I think Rooney, like you said, is incredible. I'm maybe not as big on her performance as others are. Like, I do prefer her in Carol. I think I prefer her in Side Effects. And we're going to talk about another kind of femme fatale later on, who I think is kind of like blows her performance out the water. But she's very good here. I think maybe what prevents me from saying, oh, this is like an all-timer performance, is she does feel supporting for quite a large portion of the film. And you don't really get moments of vulnerability from her until like the final scene, which she really sells. So I think it's a very good embodiment, very like physical performance. She's great, but it's not necessarily one where I'm like, oh, this is one of the best performances of the decade or whatever. But she is very good, and in her terrible Oscar lineup, she should have won because the competition was absolutely rubbish. But yeah, Meryl, yeah. Glenn Close is terrible in Albert Nobbs. Michelle Williams is really bad in My Week with Marilyn. Viola's good in The Help, but I don't necessarily think she needs an Oscar for that. I also think it would be a bad like Oscar win because she like hates The Help or whatever and regrets that. So yeah, I think she should have easily won. She wouldn't be my personal winner for this year because there's so many incredible performances. There's The Skin I Live In. There's Kirsten and Charlotte in Melancholia. There's Anna Paquin and Margaret. There's Kristen Wiig in Bridesmaids. There's Elizabeth Olsen, Marcy May Marley. There's so many great female performances this year. Tilda Swinton. We need to talk about Kevin, but she's very, very good. Behind, I think it's very perfectly cast. I think Christopher Plummer is really good. Like these performances aren't Oscar-worthy, whatever, but I think he's very good. I think Robin Wright's very good too. I love how Robin Wright's committing to the accent, Christopher Plummer's committing to the accent, Rooney Mara's committing to the accent, Daniel Craig's just playing Daniel Craig, but it works.
Yeah.
I don't really have. Oh, I think one thing that really struck me actually was I felt like there was an examination of the psyche, and I mean Fincher's very interested in like psyche of these really messed up people, right? And I think there's an examination of the differences in psyche between rapists and murderers. Obviously, rape's such a big. Also, the title card, the opening cards, amazing. Love them, so cool. Did you not like them?
No, I thought they were. I wish I could say I remembered exactly what you were talking about.
It's like it's got like the motorbike and it's like black and it like covers a woman's feet. No, it's very cool and
I didn't mind it. It didn't stand out to me particularly.
But no, I really really do love this film, and I think it's kind of underrated in his filmography. Like I feel nobody says, that's my favorite Fincher film.
Yeah.
I don't think anybody says it's bad. Yeah, I think if you were going to like a Fincher list, it would probably be like mid to low tier, where it's not as divisive as like Benjamin Button or Game or Panic Room, but it's not Gone Girl, it's not Seven, it's not Social Network, it's not Fight Club, it's not Zodiac. Which I guess is where you fall on it, right?
Yeah, it's like sort of in the middle to sort of lower end of his filmography.
Yeah.
Like it's good, but I just don't have the love for it that I think the thing is people who love this film like really really love it. I think like if people love it.
I also think it's hurt by the Swedish film coming out 2 years before, and they literally are very similar, and that's a very very good film. But I do think this one enhances aspects and it really captures the mood better, and technically it's better. No, what did you give it a 7?
I gave it I prefer it to Benjamin Button, so I give it a very weak 8 as well.
I'm glad you prefer it to Benjamin Button at least.
Yeah, but yeah, it's in the sort of lower half of Fincher's output for me. Like it's still just to sort of my average rating for Fincher's films. I added up where I keep track of like director filmography averages. David Fincher's got an 8 out of 10 average, and I've seen all his films, so like it's very accurate. 8 out of 10 with 11 films. I think that's a very good average.
So would you put Dragon Tattoo 7th then out of the 11? Above Alien 3, I presume.
Panic
Benjamin
Room
Button
and
Panic Room.
Yes. Yeah, and then so I'm just looking. No, and I put it above. I'd actually put. Well, I put Mank in between Panic Room and Benjamin Button actually.
Okay, but you prefer this to Mank too.
I prefer this to Mank, yeah. Mank
Okay.
is third from the bottom, actually.
Okay. No,
Um,
I feel like that's when most people have it, in kind of like that sixth, seventh, eighth spot.
yeah.
It's my second favorite Fincher. Um, would you nominate it for anything?
I think it's yeah, sound, editing. It'd probably be in my top 10 films of the year, so I'd probably actually I want to look at my top 10 films of 2011 would be actually, because I don't even know what, like, I literally can't pull anything to mind from that year. It would be in my top 10 of the year, but it's not. I don't think 2011 is a strong year, just based off what I
Okay.
have seen. Like, there's some films I quite like, but I don't think 2011's. I think 2011's a bit of a weaker year in terms of films that came out, even if there's a few that
Would
I do
you
really.
would you nominate Rooney?
Yeah, I probably would. I can't think of anyone else like in the category that like any other female performances in a category I prefer. Like, let me just have a look. Let me check my ratings because I don't think so. I think I probably give her the 2011 is not a very good year of films. I don't think it's fairly.
See, I have so many of my personal. I think I have like seven favorite films like of all time from 2011. But
Jesus Christ, that's a lot.
none of them are Oscar. Like I love The Skin I Live In. I love Bridesmaids. I love Melancholia. I would nominate it for a lot of things, but it's not necessarily my favorite in anything.
Mm.
But I do think I do stand by this being his most impressive on a technical level, which I feel like is controversial. But
Mm.
yeah,
Wait, what did you give it out of 10? Did you give a score for that
I gave
one?
it a 9. I not a 10 because I mean it could be a 10. I feel like the ending. I don't know. I feel like it doesn't give me enough enjoyment as a simple. Like I know there's so much more. It's a noir. It's psychological portrait. It's got all this social commentary, but I don't think it gives me enough as a simple crime mystery.
Mm.
Like it is very very simple. Um. So yeah, I'm a bit a very high 9.
Uh, yeah. So then moving on to Gone Girl.
Okay.
I think we're gonna I really like Gone Girl. I was didn't get the chance to rewatch it, unfortunately, but I do really enjoy it. I just, as much as I enjoy it, and as much as I do really like about it, I don't think it's as good as some people say it is.
Mm. Some people being me.
Yes. Well, amongst others. I think this is a film that very much appeals to, yes, certain demographics a bit more, which is fine. Like, I don't have a problem with that. I think that's fine. So you weren't here obviously, but in last week's episode when we talked about Fight Club, we talked about the whole thing of like people misunderstanding the film and idolizing Tyler Durden as a character and not getting that like he's obviously not meant to be
Yeah.
idolized. And I'm not saying that like people do necessarily with Amy, Rosamund Pike's character, but or it's certainly not as but like do you think there are people that do and sort of miss the point of the film?
I think people definitely miss the point of Gone Girl, both if you support Nick, if you support Amy. I think it's very easy to be like, oh, Amy's only doing this because Nick cheated on her, or Nick is completely innocent, Amy's psycho bitch. Like people say that, and I just think that's kind of steeped in misogyny. But I yeah, I think people can. I think it's yeah. I mean, Amazing Amy, Amy Dunn is a lot of people's favorite character, right? And a lot of them are like, oh, she was well within her rights to do that, blah blah blah. So to that extent, I can understand why you feel like some people might idealize her. I think I can only speak from my experience. I don't, but I can see why that is. I think she's just such an iconic character. I'm not sure it's that serious for some people. Like, I don't think people actually. I think it's a very extreme minority who would sit there and say, Amy's, well within her rights. She, go Amy.
Mhm.
I think most people it's kind of a joke and it's more, oh, she's just so iconic, like, whatever. But I think she is relatable, even if people don't want to admit it. She is clearly a sociopath, probably a psychopath. She clearly is, but she is relatable and she does get to the underbelly of a lot of people's marriages, a lot of people's preconceived notions of gender dynamics, of relationships. And I'm not saying everything she does is justified, but I think there's a reason why her cool girl monologue is so iconic, for lack of a better word, because yeah, I don't think anybody would say, yeah, you should go and frame your husband for murder so he gets the death penalty, but there is a lot of relatability within that, if that makes sense. So yeah, I do think people can idealize her for sure.
Yeah.
I think it'd be ridiculous if somebody was to say Amy is a psycho and a sociopath and Nick is just the innocent party. Like, that's not the case. They both have issues. I also think Nick is a narcissist. As extreme as these two characters are, there is so much of us in them, which makes the film speak to people on a cultural level, even if we don't want to admit it. But yeah, that's just my thoughts. So do you think people do idealize her?
Not really. Like, because I was looking on Reddit, because this is a conversation that has been had before on, various places. People are like asking about the same thing, and often the whole response given to that is sort of a general like, well, but what about all these men that idolize these sort of male characters who are also bad, and I think. And I'm not disagreeing with that, and I'm not saying that's not a fair point, but I don't know if that's necessarily an answer. It sort of feels like it's dodging the question. And I don't think many people do find Amy to be like idolize her. But I think just the discussion around it, I think, because some people seem to don't engage, or they sort of be like, well, but what about, insert idolized male character that should be idolized, and I think that sort of it's dodging the question. I think
what's interesting is when it was originally released, both as a book and a film, is that a lot of female audiences really did not respond to this character. They felt she gave women a bad name or whatever, like perpetuating myths that women fake.
It's definitely not
like that.
It's definitely that happened in 2023. Be a bit of a
how she kind of really resents the other women in this film, for example. But I do think it's picked up, kind of like a Gen Z audience online, where like her cool girl monologue, everything like that is very memorable. But I think with Amy, I don't think she inflicts violence on. Okay, she is clearly a psychopath. She is not correct in her methods. She destroys people's lives. But nobody's really a hero in this. There is no hero. Nick.
Yeah.
I'm not saying Nick deserves everything that comes his way, but I think we'll get onto this in a bit, but the whole ending, everything, like, he isn't completely disgusted by her actions. And Desi, who is like the victim in this because he is murdered, he's a serial creep. He is very creepy. The way he treats Amy, you can see, is very weird. He wants to treat her like a toy. As soon as she comes back after making up this whole story about being like a victim of domestic abuse and being kept captive or whatever, his first thing is, as long as you once you look like yourself again, you'll feel better. And it's kind of, well, you just want to make her attractive for you. And even when they're watching TV, he's very controlling, very dominant. So yeah, she does kill him. I'm not saying it's okay to kill people, obviously, but he is also a bit of a villain in this too. Nobody is wholly good in this, except maybe Margot. I feel like Margot comes out the best. Nick's twin. Yeah, so I think it's maybe different to, like, for example, if you were to idealize the Joker in The Dark Knight, he's inflicting violence upon innocent people. Amy is not a good role model. Please don't treat Amy like a role model, obviously, but I don't really think people do. And I do think, sidestepping the point is stupid. But I don't think it's not like, oh, poor Desi, poor Nick, these people are completely innocent. They're all very flawed people.
The problem with the whole sidestepping the argument and just sort of being like, talking about these other male characters is like, well, I don't think that really helps your case then. If you don't want to, if you're not answering the question,
two wrongs don't make a right.
Yeah, and I think, I find some people on Reddit to be really just dumb, just awful people. Yeah, and I imagine most don't. I just think it's an interesting conversation to have. Because I find it very common, people talk about, idolization of Tyler Durden and the Joker and Travis Bickle and all these characters. And, that's always a discussion that's had. Yeah, but you don't really get it the other way with women idolizing female characters. And I'm not saying, like, it's a thing that happens as commonly or whatever, but I still think it's a conversation that, regardless of where you stand, I think it's a worthwhile conversation, I think.
Because we've just done Girl with the Dragon Tattoo, I think it's important to say Amy is not like an anti-hero like Elizabeth. Like, Elizabeth is clearly morally in the wrong for a lot of things, but you do kind of think her heart's, like, in the right place.
She is she's helping try to solve this.
And she cares strongly. Like, she's a feminist character. She cares strongly about violence towards women. Amy is not a feminist. Yeah. I also don't think Gone Girl is a feminist piece. I think it's really been picked up as feminist just because it's like, oh, women doing bad things. Like, that isn't feminism. I mean, there's obviously several strands to feminism, several ways. But I don't think Gone Girl is... I also don't think it's sexist, but I don't think it's necessarily feminist. I also don't think...
Well, I don't think... Yeah. I also don't think Gone Girl is trying to make you like Amy. I don't think that's the point.
No, it isn't. And it's showing you both these people, like, it's clearly at the end, it isn't saying, oh yeah, Amy was in the right, Nick sucks. Like, clearly it's not. Like, anybody with a brain knows that. And Gillian Flynn even said, oh, I was really scared about, introducing the world to Amy Dunn because I was scared I had killed feminism. How would feminists react to this? Like, it's clearly not supposed to be an endorsement of this character. But anyway, so where do you want to start with Gone Girl? I feel like there's so much.
I mean, we've been talking about the characters a lot. I mean, we might as well just, Rosamund Pike. I really enjoy Rosamund Pike in thing. I think she's a very good. I mean, I saw Saltburn recently, and I thought she was very great in Saltburn. And it's a very different. It's more of a comedic performance in Saltburn, but I think she's a very good talent. And I don't know if I'd say she's my favorite. No, I definitely wouldn't say she's my favorite David Fincher performance, but she's probably in the top 10 somewhere, I'd say.
Okay. I thought you were about to say she's not my favorite performance in film, and I was a bit shocked.
She's definitely the best performance of the film.
Okay.
There's no question about it.
Although Ben Affleck is very good, and so is Carrie Coon. And
I do like, Ben Affleck in it, surprisingly. I never think of Ben Affleck as a good actor.
Yeah, but I think this is, like, very meta, so it's very hard to, like, he's like on the awareness, because he is kind of playing a version of himself. But he is
him and David Fincher didn't get along. Like,
oh, yeah.
That was it.
Yeah. Sorry, just to go off what you were saying with Rosamund, I think what really struck me with this rewatch, and to be clear, this is, like, probably my 13th, 14th time watching this film, but what really struck me with rewatching this, and this is my favourite Fincher, I tease this with Dragon Tattoo, this is my favourite Fincher, this is one of my favourite films I don't know if I would put it in a top 10, but it's like definitely in a top 50, top 30 favorite films of all time for me personally. But Rosamund's performance is one of my favorite performances of all time. And I think what really struck me in the rewatch was actually how restrained her performance was. I wouldn't say subtle, but it's not.
Mm.
Because whenever I watch Gone Girl and people say, "Oh, I don't know if she's like Oscar worthy," I think, really, like, how can you think that? She does so much. And then I rewatched it 2 days ago or whatever, and it struck me, she actually is quite restrained. Like, there's not really a big scene, where it's there's a crying scene or there's like a massive screaming scene. It's just what really powers the performance are her voice. The things she does with her voice is like genuinely incredible, and her body language. So I think I can see why people maybe aren't like, oh, she's not really that incredible, but I think she is. Her voice, I just want to like focus on her voice. I think obviously the screenplay for Gone Girl is incredible, but she does so, like, there's a reason why Amy is so iconic, and that is because of her voice. Just different ways how she pronounces certain things, different affectations, enunciations. There's so many different things that she does with her voice. There's like a lilt that she has where she kind of comes up at the end. Like, I know I'm focusing so much on the small things of voice, but it's so important, especially for the first half where it's voiceover. That's her entire performance. It's just a voiceover. And it's very unsettling. Even in the first half, you think, and she communicates that so much just with her voice. Like, she doesn't really have an acting scene, right? Apart from the scene on the stairs. So I'm going to talk so much about this film. I'm so sorry. But the scene on the stairs where, like, this is like my favorite scene in the entire movie, where she says, I maybe it's time. And now he's when she's talking about having a baby, and he like throws her against the stairs, but he doesn't actually. But you know what I mean. That scene.
Yeah.
She does so much with that scene, and all she does is walk downstairs. Like, she does so much with her voice in that scene, and her body language, so much with her body language that it's genuinely incredible. She genuinely makes you kind of emotional in that scene for Amy, and obviously we know it's a lie, like, later on, but she genuinely makes you emotional. She just the way she reads her lines, where she's like, that's when I realized I was frightened of my own husband. Just perfect performance. And I think what's really interesting in the first half is you see her in these voiceovers, in these flashbacks, but she's not doing very much. But the final bit where she comes home, she's got the same voice, but it's such a different performance, and it's not very flashy. But she, in the first half, you can kind of relate to her. You feel bad for her. And the scene with the stairs, they've got Like Home. That's what the track's called. Score, incredible. But when she comes home, she so different, but so she's like completely devoid of anything. She moves like a robot. Just her mannerisms. When he comes down the stairs for breakfast, and she's like, "Hello, handsome. Do you want a crepe?" Just simple things she does with her body language, and it's just a completely different person. You're like, oh, she is truly. There's nothing there behind the eyes. I don't know how she does it, but she does. And yeah, her voice, just so many things she does with her voice. And she nails the like perfect accent that Amy has, where it's this New Yorker. It's slightly snobby, but still relatable. She's kind of unlikable. She puts you on edge, but she's not likable. You still kind of gravitate towards her. And yeah, there's so much variety in the performance. There's like the various accents she does. There's the whole performance is a show, right? Like, she's showing different sides to her to different people. And she's very funny in this. When she comes home, there's so many different scenes where she's funny. There's one scene where I'm gonna name a quote, but it's not going to sound very funny because it's out of context. But typical Fincher, it's very funny. She's in the chair and she's lapping it up. She's, loving the attention the police officers are giving to her, and she's really going hard with this story. And the detective tries to interrupt her, and she says, "Now, if I may go back to the part where I was being held prisoner by a man with a history of mental problems." And it doesn't sound funny when I'm saying it, but the way she says it, it's so like, and it's like so flippant, but also so, I don't know how to explain her performance, but it's so dramatic and kind of like degrading of Desi, like a man with a history. I don't know. It's just incredible performance. And I'm only talking about her voice. There's other things she does. But yeah, the first half of her performance is just voiceover, and I genuinely think it's Oscar worthy, just what she does with the voiceover. But I will stop talking. You can interject.
I mean, I mentioned this sort of earlier on in the episode, provided I've kept it in, that it's kind of, I find, actors who play sort of a bit kind of emotionless characters, I don't think it's particularly difficult to do.
Yeah.
I think Rosamund Pike's very good at that in this. She sort of this emotionless.
I agree. I agree completely with you where it's like easier to kind of just play like psychopath, which is why I'm not really impressed with like Kathy Bates in Misery, because it's a very good performance, but it feels kind of, is it really that, like, obviously it's an incredible performance, but is it really that difficult? Like, it kind of feels a bit like a caricature at times, not really that much nuance. But
Yeah.
I think with Amy, she has to convince you for an entire half of the film that she's this relatable, cool girl. She does have to kind of present a different side to her. And you never get a scene where she shows emotion, but there's scenes where she has to fake showing emotions to other people, where she breaks down crying, or she's like, "I'm so scared," So I think that kind of helps her from falling into a trap of cliche villain, femme fatale, I think because she has to show these different perspectives and different sides to her, whether it's to the police, to the media, to Desi. And I think there's a couple of performances from female villains where you feel like people gravitate towards them because they're iconic. It's whatever. I don't. And then, are they necessarily that good a performance? I don't think that's the case here. I think it is genuinely an incredible performance from her. It's not just because it's, oh, Amy's doing bad things, so iconic, let's give her an award. No, like there's genuinely so much to her performance. Yeah, was it more restrained for you than? Like, I know it's very flashy on the surface because she's playing a psycho, but it's not. There's not like one big scene when she just like loses control and is crazy.
Yeah, like when I watched it, because I didn't get a chance to rewatch it. Actually, I couldn't find the time, unfortunately. So I'm just talking to speak of mine. But
very long.
Yeah, it is very long. Yes. It never. I remember like the scene where she kills Neil Patrick Harris, and if I remember correctly, she's just very like emotionless when I do. Like it's not like a particularly. Like it's a brutal moment, but it's never like a.
It's very like,
from my memory,
it's very cold.
It's very sort of mechanical almost, like where she's like just like stabbing him repeatedly, and that's it. And like that is quite unnerving. Like I can give this film that like that is an unnerving thing to witness someone just doing something so heinous and brutal, and there's just like nothing. Like there's just nothing. Like that's like I think really interesting.
I think like on the one hand you could say, oh, that's she's not really doing anything, but it's very hard to just completely remove yourself to kind of become like this blank vessel. I know we said Benjamin Button was like very boring and empty vessel, but this is different. She is like unnervingly scary, creepy with how she manages to just remove everything from Amy. And there is definitely a difference from the first half of Amy, where you genuinely kind of feel emotion, even on rewatches when you know the twist, and the second half of Amy, where it is very mechanical, like you're saying, very robotic, how she interacts, and
Mhm.
there's nothing behind the eyes. Do you have a personal like favorite scene from Gone Girl?
Not really. I just sort of like I just think sort of as an overall package, like as an overall film, it's one of those things where it's like I really love the film, but there's not like a scene I can just like point to as like this is an amazing scene. Really, I
What are
mean
what are
the scene
your
where she
is she
kills Neil
okay?
Patrick Harris, I did, yeah, really like that because again, there's sort of the build up to it's like oh, because if I remember correctly, there's like the you see the like scissors or whatever he's got like on the bed or something. It's like, oh, okay,
Yeah,
well, something's gonna
yeah.
happen.
What? So
Um,
you don't. And what are your problems with Gone Girl?
I just sort of, again, I should have tried to find time to rewatch it. I think, I don't know. I think it's like, again, I think maybe it's a bit long, and I think like also it is a bit weird that like this whole town is that in get like that's not really a problem really. It's just sort of I find it interesting that there's this sort of town that like they're all engaged, so invested in this, and I think it. To be honest, I do think outside of like Rosamund Pike and maybe Ben Affleck, a lot of the other performances aren't really doing a whole lot
Okay.
for me. Like Rosamund Pike, I think it's because Rosamund Pike is so good in the role that everybody else just kind of looks a bit shit in comparison. Which I find that with some films is that
Yeah,
one actor is doing so much better work that just compare like all the other actors just don't look as good comparatively.
yeah.
So,
I
which isn't necessarily a fault of the
no, but
film. It's more just
I
like
know what you mean.
it feels like Amy and sort of Nick as well are sort of the only real characters.
Yeah,
Real like they're the most sort of defined characters. Whereas like Tyler Perry, like what is that about? Like they're sort of like everyone else is just sort of like they're just sort of like pieces on a chessboard. They're sort of like background to sort of just fill the film up a bit more, I guess. That's how I.
yeah. No, that makes sense. I do get what you mean. How is saying the different timelines in Girl with the Dragon Tattoo? I wasn't really drawn to one or the other. I was engaged in both of them. I think if I had one criticism of Gone Girl, it would be that I just am more naturally gravitate towards the timeline with Amy because Rosamund is so good in it. She's so magnetic, and I think Ben Affleck's very good in it too. But I think the voiceovers with her in the first half are more interesting for me personally than like the procedural thing going on with Ben Affleck. And I think the second half when she's with Desi, that's more interesting. She's just such a huge presence. She's so incredible in the film that I agree that it can be sometimes when she's not on screen, it kind of can lag a bit. Um, but I think this film's perfectly cast. I think Rosamund is obviously like a masterstroke in casting, and she didn't have anything which would suggest she would be able to do this. She had been in lots of films, she'd been in a Bond film like 10 years ago, she'd been in An Education, she'd been in Pride and Prejudice. There's nothing in her filmography prior to this which would suggest she'd be able to play this sort of character, which I think really helps, like
Mm-hmm.
Reese Witherspoon apparently wanted to play this. That would have been appalling. She like that and just know. And
Bruce
also
Willis would not have
you don't
worked.
really know Rosamund. Like you don't know anything about her, which really helps with playing Amy.
Mm,
I think Ben Affleck's perfectly cast. That's like
yeah.
very meta casting. Every kind of likes Ben Affleck, but he's a bit of a douche. That there's like that meta thing going on. I think Carrie Coon's perfectly cast as the sister. I think I like Tyler Perry in this film, and I will defend Neil Patrick Harris's casting. I know people don't like it, and I think before I used to think maybe they should have cast like something like Armie Hammer. I don't know why I keep mentioning Armie Hammer on this podcast, but maybe somebody like Armie Hammer because he's got like that preppy like old money look. But no, Neil Patrick Harris is perfect
Mm,
because he's very weedy. He's kind of pathetic. You need somebody that you can understand. Like who has like that old money look to them, but you is somebody who Amy A can overpower physically. Like, I know Amy's a psycho, but she's not going to be able to overpower a 6'5" man. And
Yeah, however, Howard
yeah,
is much bigger. It doesn't really
and you
work.
can understand why she's so easy to control Desi. Like, Nick is more of her equal. Desi is very easy to manipulate and control, even if he thinks he's manipulating her because he's an idiot. But no, I really enjoyed the performances. I don't think anybody's giving awards-worthy performances aside from her, but I enjoyed the rest of the cast. With the town being engaged, I think sometimes people, some things I've heard as criticisms have been, it's unrealistic, it's so exaggerated, but I think that's the entire point. I think it's laid out from the first scene when you see him talking about how he wants to crack open his wife's, see what she's thinking, whatever. It is reality, but it's a very distorted reality. It's a satire, like a network, it's reality, but it gets to a place where it's an extreme. There's conveniences in Amy's plan. Like, how does she know they'll find the book? How does she know they'll find the diary? How does she know she'll be believed? How does she manage to drive halfway across the country without being recognised? How does she manage to drive from Desi's boathouse covered in blood all the way home? Like, obviously it doesn't make sense. But it's a satire. Like, it's not really reality. It's exaggerated. It's extreme. And with the people being being so engaged in it. I mean, Amy packages herself in the village on purpose because she's aware of the media, and that's really the third character. There's Nick and Amy, and then there's the media. How the media amplify the perfect victim. Amy's the perfect victim. She's a white woman. She's pregnant. She's like, the everyday girl that everybody is like, how could you do this? Like, it's sad when anybody goes missing, but it's so sad if it's, but she was perfect. She's so beautiful. She's so clever. She went to Harvard. Do you know what I mean? So I think the media's very...
Yeah, they keep calling her Amazing
Amy. And at the end of the day, the whole point of Gone Girl for me is you see two people, and I think we're all guilty of it. When we meet somebody new, right? It doesn't even have to be like romantic. Whenever you meet somebody, you're always putting on a different version of yourself, right? Trying to put on a better version of yourself. And that's what happens with Amy and Nick. He's trying to aspire to her level, and she's being the cool girl, which, the big cool girl monologue, which I think we all can relate to an extent. And obviously with Amy, it's a bit different because she's always putting on an act because she's a psycho. She has to do that because her parents have literally plagiarized her entire childhood. Amazing Amy, she's used to having that better version of herself sold through all these books. So it's like kind of second nature to her. And when she meets Nick, he's trying to pretend to be somebody better than he is. And that's why, in those voiceovers, obviously you have to take everything with a pinch of salt because most of it's fabricated, but she says the early entries are mostly true. They were the happiest couple they knew, and she says, what's the point in being together if you're not happiest? It's all about how we put on a version of ourselves in relationships, etc., etc. But Nick can't keep up with it. Amy's content to keep doing the cool girl thing, and that's why Amy's had enough. Nick doesn't. He can't keep up with this persona he's put on, and what wins her back is him putting on that persona in the interview. And with Nick, we can also, Amy's a psycho. She was a psycho before she did all those terrible things to that boy that she accused of rape, of raping her, blah, blah. It wasn't because Nick cheated on her. She was a psycho before. But it is relatable. Her husband, she's moved home to look after his dying mother, and he's started an affair. He's not putting in the effort, etc., etc. And there's the flashback on the stairs. What I noticed in the last rewatch is you see him like pushing up his hair, and he's saying he's going to go see friends. Obviously, he's not going to go see friends. He's really, taking time to see how he looks because he's probably going on the date with Andy. And she finds like a jewelry box which she puts down, and I think it's implied that it's probably some jewelry he's bought Andy, and she's realised this, etc. So there is kind of that relatability that yeah, this guy is a douchebag. Yeah, Amy's pretending to be this girl, but he also pretends to be something. He's not keeping it to it, and now he's, having an affair, etc., etc. And she's bought him a bar, and that doesn't excuse what she does, but it makes it somewhat relatable when, when obviously nobody goes and frames the husband murder, but it kind of like taps into an underbelly of relationships. And there's something in Nick which is attracted to that, even if he doesn't want to admit it. Like at the end, why does he stay with her? Yes, he's trapped because she's come back. She's played the media. She's the perfect victim. He's the douchebag. But Margot says at the end, she's like, you want to stay with her, don't you? Because deep down, he is kind of attracted to it. He is a narcissist too, and he's kind of attracted to it. When she says, I killed for you, it kind of, he doesn't want to admit it, but he kind of likes it. He isn't completely, he's repulsed, but he's also attracted to it, and I think it really taps into that kind of underbelly. Like, why are people so fascinated with Amy? Like you're saying, she's an evil person, but there's something attractive about her. She's interesting to watch. She's interesting to follow. You shouldn't root for her, but you do kind of root for her slightly because her husband's a douchebag, And the media's so important. We see these two people pretending to be better versions of themselves. And which is the version the media likes? It's when Nick puts on the show to get Amy back. They like that Nick. The media constantly amplifying, responding to these performances, to these versions of ourselves we put on for the cameras. And at the end of it, they get a book deal. They're probably going to have a reality TV show. And they end with them being interviewed by the media. So the media is such an important part of it. Yeah, sorry, I just spoke at you. But I promise I'll shut up soon. But the whole, is Amy a feminist character? Is she not? I don't think she's a feminist character. She's resentful towards other women, and I think what's very important in the film is she plays the media. Everybody believes her. She's the perfect victim. Yeah, it's exaggerated, but it's a satire, and Gone Girl is purposely funny. Like, there's so many funny moments. Like, there's one scene where Andy goes to the media, and she, is telling them that she had an affair with Nick Dunn. And there's a scene where she's, there's a scene, I think she's like, oh, why is she dressed like a babysitter? The girl with the giant come on me tits is dressed like a fucking Mennonite. Like, it's funny. Like, she's a funny character. Which is why Fincher is perfect for this material, because it's got that dark humor. But with Amy, she's so resentful towards other women, and what's important in this film is I think she underestimates other women because she thinks she like understands like the weakness of women and thinks she's better than it. She underestimates Greta, the girl on the compound who steals from her, and she says to her, oh, did he make you do this? And she's like, no, I made him do it. And you see how there's like this darkness within women which you don't really see in media as such, and she underestimates it too. Even though she knows it, she thinks she's like the only one. She underestimates other women, and the only women who see through her, the media all buy her perfect victim trail, but the only people who see it through it are Nick, and other people are all women. The detective, Rhonda, she at the end is asking all the questions, and all the men are like, no, we've let her. There's a room of police officers, at the end when she's recounting her story, and I think she's the only woman apart from one other, and all the rest, there's like 10 men, and everybody believes Amy except the woman. And Margot sees through her, and Greta, the girl at the compound, is only the woman who can see through Amy, because she uses she uses her femininity, she uses her sex appeal with Desi. She subverts sex where it's usually seen as kind of I don't know, she turned into something violent. When we think of sex, we think of it kind of more as like a masculine thing rather than a feminine thing. Or if you're thinking of violence and sex, you're thinking, oh, it's the man perpetuating violence against the women.
Yeah.
She's subverting that.
Yeah, you never really see it the other way around. It's always like I can't think of any film off the top of my head where like a woman
Girl with the
is
dragon
committing.
tattoo, but yeah.
Yeah, but that's a bit different. Yeah. It's revenge more than that. You never see like you never have a
she's
female
yeah,
antagonist who's sort of doing that,
she's
which
subverting it there, and she's using her femininity. She's using, the parts which maybe you would think hold her back as a woman. She's using it and subverting it and using, this traditional male battleground, middle ground, whatever you want to call it, and subverting it and committing violence against a man during a sexual act. And it's a very emasculating thing. Like, he literally, I don't know how graphic we want to get, but when he literally ejaculates and she slits his throat, like, it's a very emasculating thing. Like, he's just so pathetic in the moment.
yeah.
And the only other thing,
Oh, that's because she's trying to disguise it as a rape.
yeah,
Which is so.
yeah, yeah. And there's one other thing, sorry, about the whole gender thing I want to bring up. So often pregnancy is seen as a trap for women. And don't get me wrong, women can get pregnant with men and it's a trap for the man or whatever. But usually when a character gets pregnant,
Yeah.
the woman's been raped or she's, trapped with her baby, the husband wants nothing to do with it. She, her life's over because she has a baby and she has no, you know what I mean? There's so many tragic films where it's seen as a curse.
Yeah.
Here she's subverting that again. She's using pregnancy to trap Nick. She gets pregnant at the end. She has him. I mean, it's kind of implied. We don't actually know if she did it, but she gets artificially inseminated, and it's implied that she's now pregnant.
Mm-hmm.
And she's using something so feminine, so traditionally feminine, which is seen as a curse for women in the situation. She's using it to trap the man. So that's another subversion that I really love what Gillian Flynn does with that.
Mm-hmm.
And also just even, sorry,
Yeah.
I will shut up, I promise. But she, even in that argument when he reveals that she's pregnant, when he finds out that she's pregnant, it's the scene where he throws her against the wall and she's like, I'm the cunt you married, that scene, she's used, he's thrown her against the wall, but she's still the one in control. She's saying cunt. How often do you see a woman saying cunt in a film? She's saying cunt. It's a great scene, by the way.
I mean, I'm so whenever I watch an American film and they just use that word, I'm like, huh.
Right.
I'm not used to it because I've seen so much British.
Yeah, nobody
TV
would dare want to say that.
I live in Australia. Yeah, and in Australia, you just hear it every day. It's not. It's always surprising, and I read an article recently. Pete Davidson was using the word against women, which
Isn't.
a
Yeah,
bit
it's not.
a bit misogynistic, but I think if it was just because the controversy just using the word, I don't think is. But also, I'm from a country where that's just used, every day. I don't see the problem if it's being used towards women specifically. Then I'm like, okay, that's a bit.
Yeah, but I think
it's
different in America, right? They have bigger censorship. They're swearing.
America's.
Yeah. So I think
it's America.
More. It's striking. He's using.
It's that's why I see it's a bigger deal because it's how America's weird though.
It is.
The censorship.
America is weird.
In America because it's guns can be sold to children, but you can't show naked women. No, we can't. It's this what is okay and what isn't. It's
I feel like you'll disagree with me here, but I'm honestly shocked that this isn't 18. Dragon Tattoo 18, okay. And I know there's that explicit scene where she slits his throat in this, but aside from that, I'm does this really justify an 18? And I know that is a very explicit.
Wait, this has got an 18?
18.
That's insane. This is not that
bad. I think it should
bad.
be a 15. I'm so shocked it's an 18. It came up 18. I was
I get. Yeah, I get the whole the violence, when she kills him. Totally fair. This is I get that.
An 18.
But Girl with the Dragon Tattoo makes obvious sense. Of course, there's brutal. It's a brutal rape. That alone. Yeah, that's crazy. Because here, in Australia, because I think you've got different ratings. Because we've got it's G, PG, M, MA, and R. That's the sort of range, and R is 18 plus. But for here, it's an MA, which is 15 plus, which I think is fair. I think that's reasonable.
Yeah, I think that's what Gone Girl Like, obviously it's different.
Because beyond that one scene of
There is not.
violence,
There's no
is
other.
there anything
Like,
else
there's that scene where
really?
he like pushes her against the table, but like stairs. That's not really that bad. I mean, it's obviously bad, but you know what I mean. And
Big of a problem though.
there is nothing.
It's a bit violent,
But I don't even think there
but
is.
I don't
Oh,
see why it's.
I guess there's that scene in the mirror, with the cool girl monologue, and she says, um, grown-ups suffer consequences. And, she like hits herself with a hammer, but you don't even see
Yeah.
that. It cuts, so you don't actually see her.
Yeah.
I don't know why it's only 18, but, yeah.
Yeah. That's really bizarre.
I think, you said everything. I've spoken way too long, sorry.
Look, we've been recording. It's gonna be close to 3 hours by the time we're done recording this. So I think we should get close. Well, actually, it's like 2 hours. It'll be like 2.5 maybe. We've got to wrap it up. I give it a. Sorry.
Do you have any last thoughts on it?
I am surprised that this is so highly rated on IMDb, because this just doesn't really scream. Like, this just doesn't come across as like an IMDb favorite, really.
Yeah.
In the sense of like I can see why Letterboxd would love this film. But IMDb, it's sort of like, this is interesting. Like don't get me wrong, I do really like the film. I think it's maybe like in fact, I think it's probably in my top 5 now, because I rewatched 7 and The Game, and I didn't love them as much. So I think this is now in my top 5.
Yeah.
I think it just because stuff has been pushed down and I've adjusted my ratings. I think this is my fourth favorite.
Yeah.
So that's pretty good. I give it a 9, a very weak 9, might I add.
What do you think? But yeah, sorry, enough about Gone Girl. I did give it a 10, unsurprisingly. It's my favorite Fincher. It's one of my favorite films of all time, and Rosamund's one of my favorite performances of all time. So.
Yeah, and then to move on, because we've been recording for a while, to move on with Mank. Now, I already did an Oscars episode for Mank. I did like a retrospective of the Best Picture nominees that year, so I've already talked about Mank. So I'm going to let you lead this one, because I've basically given my thoughts already on this one.
Okay, I really like Mank.
I think you like. I think you mentioned that you're a fan.
I am. I think I didn't love it as much on rewatch. Like, I think there's a time when I had it in my favorite films, which I wouldn't.
Whoa.
Which I wouldn't get as far now. But
high praise.
But it is one of my favorite films from 2020. I really love it. I think it's immaculately.
Wow.
I think it is immaculately crafted. I love how he manages to capture the era. Even if there's like a couple of problems I have with the cinematography, but for the most part, I think he really manages to capture the era and really transport you back there. I think it has. I think it's much more cynical than people make out. Like, people just describe this as Oscar bait, which, okay, sure, I don't really like that as
it kind of is. Yeah,
but I don't really think it needs to be an insult. Like, oh, that's Oscar bait. Like, okay, does that make it bad? No.
Not inherently, no. There, like, Oscar bait can be very.
Yeah, but it would be bad Oscar bait. It doesn't. Good. It's not like. It's not an insult to say Oscar bait. Like, that's just describing something.
Yeah.
But no, I think it's much more cynical. It's not just like a love letter. Like, I remember seeing people describe this as a love letter to cinema, and I thought, what? It's not a love letter. It's very cynical. I think it's very nihilistic. I think it's very fatalistic. It's not my favorite Fincher, but it is maybe my fourth favorite after the 3 we just spoke about. I really love the performances. I think Gary Oldman's excellent. I think Amanda Seyfried's amazing. I like all the supporting cast. I think Charles Dance is really good as William Randolph Hearst. I think there's definitely strong.
I really like Charles Dance, just in general.
Same.
I think he's not in it though.
But he delivers.
If you're talking about the cast,
he delivers the crucial line, which is the whole point of the film. The monkey. the organ grinders monkey parable, like the whole point of the movie. I think the film's got like a very I've never seen Citizen Kane, by the way. That is, you should. Yes.
I mean, I did also see Mank before Citizen Kane,
Yeah.
and maybe that would have helped.
Yeah, people say it really does
And
help.
I think Citizen Kane is an incredible film. I will say this, I don't think it's the greatest film ever. Like Citizen Kane is a fantastic film. Like, don't get me wrong, but I'm just like, I don't think this is the greatest. I'm very rarely one to be like, like when I saw The Godfather, I don't get the love for The Godfather. But like, Citizen Kane's good, and I do actually feel like if I watched Citizen Kane and then immediately watched Mank, it would give me a different appreciation of the film.
Yeah.
Like sort of watch Mank right after.
I haven't. Yeah.
Like Citizen Kane is worth watching.
Yeah, I obviously need to watch Citizen Kane, and I understand that people say you can't really understand Mank if you don't watch Citizen Kane. I didn't find that to be the case because I do know about William Randolph Hearst, I do know about Marion Davies, I do know about Upton Sinclair, I do know who Charles Leder is. Like, I know these characters from this era, so it wasn't really.
Yeah, I don't think it didn't impact my viewing. Like when I saw Mank,
But
I enjoyed it.
Maybe it could enhance
but
it.
I was expecting more.
Yeah.
Yeah. I just remember being disappointed because I was like a big Fincher fan. I'd seen sort of some of it, and I'd been like, oh, I was expecting a bit more from this. As a fan of Fincher's work, I don't think it's a bad film by any means. Like, do not get me wrong. There's a lot I do quite like. Gary Oldman. He's good, but again, he wouldn't have been in my top 5 for actor. Personally, anyway, I do really like Amanda Seyfried, just in general. I do, and I think she is quite decent in her. She's not in it that, like, a lot of the, the supporting cast is really not in it as much as I was expecting. Like, it really is about Herman Mankiewicz, which I find very interesting.
And I love their interactions are the high point of the film for me. I love every time she's on screen. I think their relationship's very fun. It's also very there's like hidden meanings in it. But it's just very fun to see them interacting on screen. I think there's a very strong social commentary, which is very easy to take away the cynicism of it. But I don't necessarily think it's a masterpiece. I don't think it doesn't really leave me that much to chew on afterwards. I'm not thinking about it for days on end. But yeah, I do think there is a message to take away. I do think the climactic scene, the party scene which he interrupts.
Which is what the poster is basically.
Yeah,
right?
That is the thing. I think that's phenomenally done. I think that's easily the best scene in the film. I love that scene so much, but afterwards it was a bit like, that was really good. I really enjoyed that, one of the best of the year, but doesn't necessarily stay with me as much. But yeah, no, I really like it. I think it was slightly surprising, I think, because when it did come out, people thought it was just like a love letter to Citizen Kane, etc., etc. But no, the whole, Charles Dance delivers that organ grinder's monkey, and kind of strips Mank of his agency and kind of lays it out to him that can be replaced. It shows how toxic this industry is. We've seen, that guy who killed himself because he had to make those films which were in the Upton Sinclair, the socialist campaigner, etc., etc. And you see the underbelly of Hollywood and these characters. And the organ grinders monkeys parable is very interesting. How he describes you only have power because Louis Mayer is giving you the power, and Louis, whatever, he's only got power because I'm funding him. And then Mank is just a monkey who can be replaced at any moment. But he then kind of turns it back on Hearst by writing this film about him. And I think also it shows kind of the codependency in the industry, how you can't really have like one without the other, it's all interlinked, etc., etc. But and I also think it was really
Yeah.
relevant watching this the other day with all the actors strikes and everything going on. That was quite
Yeah.
interesting. But yeah, what do you think of Mank?
Yeah, it's all right. Yeah, I kind of get the whole like love letter thing, but honestly, I think this is more of just a way of David Fincher to honor his
Dad, yeah.
dad. I think that's why
I
this
think
was made. Really, I don't think
the love letter thing, I think it's a
it.
love letter in terms of its like aesthetic and its pastiche, but the actual message, yeah,
Oh yeah, with the
yeah.
cinematography and it's in black and white and all that, which I don't. I actually think it is a very well
I think
shot
it's very well shot too.
film. Like I think
I
it look
I really love the cinematography.
and it looks
I
very
do
nice.
wish it shot on film. I think it does take it away that it's digital. Like I don't think it truly captures.
Yeah, if I wish they'd really committed to it. I mean, like we are gonna shoot this on film, black and because it would have really because it does just feel a bit like disingenuous, I guess, like that it's shot on digital. It's
Yeah,
like if you really want to make this like an old school Hollywood production, you need to fully go for it. Just shoot it on. Have it be like if it wasn't, it could like make it like it is the 40. Like and again, not to say the cinematography bad, like because it is a very well shot movie. It looks great. It's a film where the black and white isn't like, oh, this is just black and white because you think it it's like fucking Belfast or whatever, where it's like it's just black and
yeah.
white
There
because
is a
it looks,
purpose.
I find out a lot with black and white cinematography is a lot of the time it's just like, oh, this looks cool, doesn't it? There's no thematic reason. Like I saw Poor Things yesterday, and like there is some black and white cinematography, but it doesn't feel unnecessary. It's not just like it does look fantastic, but it is also just sort of like, well, this is sort of here because it's got more of a reason to it, and I don't mind that Mank is in black and white. I like the whole like it has like the script page thing or whatever, like where it's got like it's got like the like interior, you know, house or whatever, like it has those kinds of things at like the top of the screen, doesn't it? I'm not misremembering that.
With the screen.
Yeah, where it says like how on scripts you'll like when there's like a new setting, it's like interior day,
Oh yeah,
and then
yeah.
there's like a location or whatever.
It does fully commit to the era it's trying to replicate, which is what makes it not being shot on film annoying. But yeah, it has the fade outs. It has what are they called? Cigarette. What are they called? Like the mark.
Cigarette
Cigarette
burns.
bands. They have yeah, like you said, they're like the screen setting cards, whatever you want to call them. But yeah, so for you, is it just like it's a good film that you can appreciate the
Yeah,
craft, but
like I think in terms of production and how it's put together, I can't really fault it that much. I just am not that engaged by the script. And I don't know if that's because, like, I don't know what David Fincher's dad was like. His dad a filmmaker,
his
or was
dad
his
was a
dad just
journalist
writer?
who he wrote this because of Pauline Kael's article, which basically said that Mank wrote all of Citizen Kane and Orson Welles had nothing to do with the writing. And so I think he was a journalist and he was interested in that, and he decided to write the script based on that, which is kind of that myth is rebuked. People say, oh, actually, Orson Welles did
Yeah,
rewrite several parts of it, but that's just the basis of the film.
yeah, yeah. And I think the film as well, because I sort of how it had been sold to me and what I noticed, like it was going to be like this whole sort of battle, like this whole Mank and Orson Welles were going to have this whole thing about like who got
It's
like
not.
who like sort of got credited on this, but it's really not. And I think maybe that, and I think it's a bit because I thought like, oh, this could be very interesting. These two guys who both have like sort of legitimate claims, arguably, trying to, but I just think the film doesn't, I don't know, it wasn't as, it was a bit sort of like, it felt a bit meandering, it was just like, it's an enjoyable watch, like it is, and I think there is a lot that you can get from it, like on a technical level, like again, cinematography wise, it's phenomenal, it's beautifully shot, the sets, the acting, it's all good, but it's just sort of like, it's not quite, it's just the script. The script lets it down, and for me, that's the thing that matters most personally to me. In for a film, is like, is this script, like, if the script doesn't work, then the film isn't gonna work that much for me. Like, the script is like the thing I need to work before anything else.
Yeah.
Like production, design, and the score and all that. That sort of is sort of secondary to, does the script, and I guess also performances, but the script is like the starting point. And if I don't like the script, or I'm not engaged by the script, then the film just sort of doesn't work.
I can completely understand. I really love the script personally. I really love the screenplay, but I think structurally, like in terms of like an overarching story, it can be a bit like leave you wanting. But I think the actual like dialogue, the interplays between characters is very, like, it really captures the era, and I think it really like portrays the wit of Mank. Like I felt like I really understood him as a person and what gravitated people towards him. But no, I do understand the complaints with that. I really like that it's not actually about Orson Welles versus Mank, because I think when you go and sit down to watch Mank, you're told, oh, it's a love letter to cinema, oh, it's about Orson Welles versus Mank, and it's not about any of those things. It's, on the surface, it looks like a love letter with the pastiche, with the aesthetic, with the cinematography, with the, with all the design, etc., etc. But it's actually a critique of the industry, which I think it's so cleverly done that it's recreated this entire era, and it's sit down and you get those people who are like, oh, this is amazing, I get to watch a 1940s film again. But it's actually a critique of it. It's dressed up as a love letter, but it's actually critiquing the exact thing it's replicating. And as for the Orson Welles, and again, that's something I really enjoyed, that, and I think it relates to Citizen Kane, like the whole like idea of like the rosebud, like what is the bigger emblematic thing at play, is smells about Mank, it's about the system, and I think that really relates to the overarching theme of them being, the whole like monkey, organ grinders monkey, where they're just pawns in this bigger system. Like, we think it's about these two people, but they're actually just pawns in this bigger system, which they are actors in, or who don't. That makes sense. So I can understand why it was like frustrating that it wasn't about that, but I also appreciate that it wasn't about that. And also I think it helps the film that it's not about that, because if it got into a whole Orson Welles versus Mank, who wrote Mank, that would be controversial, because it's, it's got the premise that it was written by Mank. But if it got into whole, who wrote what, who wrote this, who wrote that, I think, then it opens itself up to more criticism from critics. Well, actually, actually, Orson Welles did this, Mank actually did it, you know what I mean? But yeah, no, I think we probably are like roughly on the same level of this, where we appreciate it on a technical level and we appreciate the messaging, but it's not really something which sticks with us as much. With the whole meandering aspect, I completely relate. I also don't really get complaints that Mank's boring, though. I mean, people will say Mank's boring, and then they gave Nomadland Best Picture, but okay.
Yeah, Nomadland.
Yeah, I don't think
Mank,
like, even if it leaves you a bit cold on the overarching story, the actual scenes are very entertaining. Like the interplay, the dialogue between the characters, these characters are very fascinating, very interesting. All their introductions, like you said, they're relegated to very small parts, but all their introductions, like Lewis, I don't know what his name is, Mayor, like, the MGM guy, his introduction where he describes the philosophy of MGM and how, and then he goes on and says he wants all his employees to take a 50% pay cut. Like, you get everything you need to know about that character from those 5 minutes, and it's very entertaining to watch that happen. then you get everything you need to know about Marion Davies, then you get everything you need to know about William Randolph Hearst, Rita Alexander, etc., etc. So even if the overarching story leaves you a bit cold, it's a bit like, well, what are we building to? I think the actual scenes themselves are entertaining. And I do get it feeling meandering, but I think each scene reveals, like, unpicks and further, like, dark underbelly to the industry. Like, you have Mayor saying 50% need to take, his employees need to take 50% pay cut. You find out from William Randolph Hearst that he's trying to, like, launch Marion Davies' career. Then you find out that they're trying to fix the election with fake videos where they're using people discrediting Upton Sinclair, but they're actually actors, etc. So as it goes on, you unpick the levels of corruption until you build to that big climactic scene. If I have one criticism, I think the flashback scenes to Hearst Castle and, the industry back in the 1930s with all those characters is much more interesting than the present day of watching Mank trying to write Citizen Kane. I think that's a bit. I think the flashbacks overshadow it so much that it has a bit of a. It gets a bit jarring every time you go back to him just drinking, writing, with his leg broken or whatever.
Yeah, I think it's. I don't think it's a bad film. And I do kind of like when a filmmaker just says, fuck it, I'll make a film that, like, only I want to see. Like, they're just like, I don't give a shit, I'll just make what I want, I mean, that's what Tarantino's entire fucking career is, basically. And I love Tarantino, don't get me wrong, but a lot of his films are just like, only you really wanted to see this, mate, and it's fine, I don't mind, but, I'm always gonna see whatever David Fincher makes. Like, I'm not gonna, he's, again, my favorite filmmaker, so I'm going to see what he makes, regardless of what it is or what it's about. I'm going to see what he makes. But yeah, Mank is one of his weakest films. Not a bad film, just I don't see myself watching it that much comparatively to most of his other films.
Yeah, no, I completely understand.
It would have been a better Best Picture winner than Nomadland, though. I want to make that clear.
Well,
It would have been a better choice than Nomadland. That's not even a question. Nomadland was the worst nominee that year.
I think anything would be a better winner than Nomadland. But I just wanted to shout out so I know I kind of critique the cinematography with it not being shot on film, but I am a fan of the cinematography. I'm glad it won over Nomadland. And
at least, yeah, I don't even, like, what is so interesting
like
about
the natural
Nomadland?
light,
like, Manx is interesting.
Use of natural light, I don't know. But with Mank, there's so many framing.
Yeah.
There's a couple of things I just wanted to highlight. There's the framing of William Randolph Hearst. Every time Mank bumps into him early on, he's the way he's shot, he's on a higher level. Whether he's actually on a higher level or not, he's shot, and that kind of, displays the power disparity, how he's the one with the power, Mank is, just a puppet. And I wanted to highlight the big party, the big costume party, when Charles Dance, who, like we said, is really great in this, even though he's barely in it, he's really, really good. And I love him as an actor too. I think he's always very good at, like, those villainous roles where they're kind of disarmingly charming, but they have, like, that dark.
Yeah.
But that whole scene in the castle, there's the scene where he tells Mank that he is just where he says that parable, which is basically what the entire film is about, and the way it's shot, Mank is really, like, shot really like this really small figure in this enormous cast in this very narrow door frame. I think that really captured the film. Like, he's just this very small part of a very big grand system, etc. And they really highlighted that with how they shot that scene. And yeah, I mean, I don't really think there's that much. I think it's a very simple film to understand, like, what the messaging is. And even though it's 2 hours, 10 minutes, it feels so much shorter because Gone Girl's like 2.5 hours, Dragon Tattoo's 2.5 hours, Benjamin Button's 3 hours. And I feel like it really races.
Yeah, it's not actually that
Yeah,
long.
I felt it genuinely felt like a 90-minute movie to me. The only person I'm not that keen on is Tom Burke as Orson Welles. He has him down. Like I can see he seems like a perfectly cast because he looks like him. I don't really think he nails the voice, and I don't really think he has the gravitas that Orson Welles had. I know it felt like a bit underwhelming when he popped up. I was like, oh, okay. What did you give it out of 10?
I gave the film a 7 out of 10. Yeah. You're gonna give it a higher rating.
I gave it.
certain.
I had it at a 9. I think I'm probably gonna sit with an 8. It could be a 9. I feel like I wanna rewatch it again already. Like I actually think it's very enjoyable. I don't really know why people think it's so boring, but yeah, I think just like a solid 8 for now. Very good. I think I haven't seen 2 of them, but I would put this 4th out of 9. I'd go 1 Gone Girl, 2 Dragon Tattoo, 3 Social Network, 4 Mank, 5th Zodiac, which I need to rewatch because I haven't watched in ages. 6th. No, actually 5th Panic Room. I really love Panic Room. I actually really like Panic Room. 7th The Game, and then I don't really like 7. So it's between 7 and Benjamin Button. I don't really like 7. Sorry.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Okay, so if I was to rank them, which I'm going to now, I'm going to go from the worst to the best. So I'd go Alien Cubed, Panic Room, Mank, Curious Case of Benjamin Button, The Girl with the Dragon Tattoo, The Game, 7, Gone Girl, Zodiac, The Social Network, and Fight Club. I've got no idea where I'll land on The Killer because that could go.
I think The Killer will be mid-tier.
8, 7 to 9 maybe. I've got no idea. I don't think it'll be the best of Fincher, but it'll probably be
Yeah, I think it won't be bad. It's he knows the territory, but I don't think it'll be I think it'll be mid-tier. Him.
Yeah. So that's it. Thank you for listening. This was so much longer than I thought.
I'm so sorry. That was my fault with Gone Girl. You let me talk too long.
Thank you for joining us for this one. Thank you for joining me this week, Sasha. If you want to do this again at some point, the door is always open.
Thank you.
If you are interested at any point. This has been very long, but last week's we only recorded the first half. We only recorded for an hour and a half, really. So this, I think, equals out to this will be much longer. But I hope you enjoyed listening. It says we've been recording for about 3 hours. So we've been recording for a long time. I hope you enjoyed. Check out all my other previous episodes. And that's pretty much it. And I will be discussing Killer when it comes out in the review of the year. Which should be fun because I have burnt myself out of new movie releases though, to be honest. But I'm still gonna see it because Fincher. Do you have any final things you want to say, Sasha?
No, thank you so much for having me. I really enjoyed it. Apologies in advance to anybody listening for my Gone Girl monologues.
Very long, but thank you. Thank you for listening to this week's episode. I hope you enjoyed. It's a much longer one this week, so hopefully it makes the last couple have been a bit shorter. And I'll see you all in the next one. Goodbye.